This lesson will cover Key Issue 4, Part 2 of Chapter 9. We covered 4.1 through 4.4 in a previous lesson. Please refer to that if you haven't already. Today we will cover 4.5 through 4.7. We'll look at global food trade, global agriculture and undernourishment, and sustainable agriculture. As the world has become more and more globalized, trade in food has increased rapidly in the 21st century. Through global trade, exporting countries benefit from revenue, and importing countries meet the food needs of their people. However, increased food trade is generating challenges for both exporting and importing countries. Today, Japan is by far the leading importer of food, followed by the United Kingdom, China, and then Russia. The agricultural industry is huge for the United States. The U.S. remains the world's leading exporter of grain, including nearly 1/2 of the world's maize exports. Maize, also known as corn. Agricultural products are moving primarily from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere. The overall share of exports accounted for by the United States, however, has declined rapidly from the 1970s to the 21st century. Its biggest competing regions include Latin America and Southeast Asia. If you look at Figure 9-51, located on page 340 of your textbook, you will see that the value of agricultural exports has increased to $1.3 trillion in 2012. Many subsistence farmers are trying to increase their yields using fertilizer, pesticides, and machinery. However, for many African and Asian countries, the main way to obtain agricultural supplies is to import them from other countries. Subsistence farmers lack the money to buy agricultural equipment and materials from developed countries. So to generate the funds they need to buy agricultural supplies, they produce something that they can sell to developed countries. Developing countries sell some manufactured goods, but most raise funds through the sale of crops in developed countries. Consumers in developed countries are willing to pay high prices for fruits and vegetables that otherwise would be out of season, or for crops such as coffee and tea that can't be grown in developed countries because of the climate. Take a look at Figure 9-52 located on page 341 of your textbook. As you can see here, the Western Hemisphere has many states that export food, while Europe and Asia have many importers. Let's look at Figure 9-53, also located on page 341 of your textbook. You can see that drug crops grown in the developing world are trafficked, also known as illegally traded, to developed countries in North America and Europe. Export crops grown in some developing countries, particularly Latin America and Asia, can be converted to drugs. There are three main leading drugs: cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. Cocaine is derived from the coca leaf, most of which is grown in Colombia or neighboring countries like Peru and Bolivia. Most consumers are located in developed countries, especially in North America. The principal shipping route is from Colombia by sea to Mexico or other Central American countries, and then by land through Mexico to the US. Heroin is derived from raw opium gum, which is produced by the opium poppy plant. Afghanistan is the source of nearly 90% of the world's opium. Most of the remainder is grown in Myanmar and Laos. Most traffic flows from Afghanistan through Iran, Turkey, and the Balkans to Western Europe, where the largest numbers of the world's users live. Marijuana produced from the cannabis plant is cultivated widely around the world. It is overwhelmingly grown in Mexico and the United States. Many have argued that the United States' fight against the war on drugs has been largely ineffective, as the largest demand for these drugs happens to be in North America and Europe. It has also been argued that perhaps the decriminalization of these drugs might help decrease the demand of the product and would be more efficient in fighting against the war on drugs. Take some time to look at the routes on this map. The main routes for heroin are from Afghanistan through Southwest Asia to Europe and through Central Asia to Russia. The main routes for cocaine are from Colombia to North America through Mexico and to Europe by sea. The next topic we'll be looking at is agriculture and undernourishment. The future of food and agriculture is being pulled in global and local directions. On one hand, an increasing integrated global agricultural system is devoted to producing the most food at the lowest cost for the world's 7+ billion humans. At the same time, the biggest increase in demand in developed countries is for locally grown food produced through sustainable farming methods. Many folks in developed countries are becoming increasingly concerned with the long-run damage to the environment and to local ecosystems for the sake of short-term production. Again, in contrast, critics charge that the local and organic movements are not capable of providing affordable food to the world's humans. Take a look at figure 9-54, located on page 342 of your textbook. Increasing food prices represent a challenge to food supply, especially for people who spend a significant percentage of their income on food. This indicates that the greatest challenge to world food supply in the 21st century has been food prices rather than food supply. The UN attributes the record high food prices to 4 factors. 1, poor weather, especially in major crop growing regions of the South Pacific and North America. Second, higher demand, especially in high population countries like China and India. Third, smaller growth in productivity. And lastly, the use of crops as biofuels instead of food, especially in Latin America. Take a look at figure 9-55, located on page 342 of your textbook. In Africa, increases in food supply have barely kept up with the population growth. Food production and food per capita indexes are set at 100 in the year 2005. Food production is increasing at about the same rate as population in Africa, and as a result, food production per capita is staying about the same. Take a look at figure 9-56, also located on page 343 of your textbook. India and China have the largest numbers of undernourished people. Undernourishment is the dietary energy consumption that is continuously below that needed for healthy life and carrying out of light physical activity. The UN estimates that 1/2 of people who are undernourished in the world come from South Asia and East Asia. Again, the largest numbers coming from India and China. As a percentage of a country's population, undernourishment is most prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia. 1/4 of the population in sub-Saharan Africa and 1/5 in South Asia are undernourished. That can be seen here in figure 9-57, located on page 343 of your textbook. The highest rates of undernourishment, again, are in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Several sub-Saharan countries have the highest percentages of undernourished people per capita. The world as a whole has made progress in reducing hunger during the 21st century. As you can see in figure 9-58, located on page 343 of your textbook, undernourishment has decreased since 1990 in every world region except sub-Saharan Africa. The last topic, 4.7, is about sustainable agriculture. We're going to be looking at concerns over environment and health leading to organic farms, which are increasing in developed countries, trying to reduce herbicides, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. We'll also look at how pesticides on produce can present health threats. And lastly, we'll look at how the government implements policies to help farmers in the attempt to create more sustainability. The most rapid growth in demand has been for organic food, including non-GMO food. Many consumers in developed countries are questioning the health risks in consuming biotech food, and this is because of the high containment of chemicals and long-term environmental impacts that they have on agriculture. Take a look at figure 9-59, located on page 344 of your textbook. Australia has a large share of the world's organic farming. Europe is also an important region. In organic farming, crops are grown without application of herbicides and pesticides to control weeds. GMO seeds are also not used. In organic farming, animals consume crops grown on the farm and are not confined to small pens. The moral and ethical debate over animal welfare is particularly intense regarding confined livestock production. The European Union has banned the use of antibiotics in livestock, and many hope that the United States will eventually follow suit. The U.S. Department of Agriculture tests samples of fruits and vegetables for pesticides. The 5 most pesticide-ridden fruits are apples, peaches, nectarines, strawberries, and grapes. Leafy greens like kale and collards also have especially high concentrations of insecticides. The 5 cleanest types of produce include avocados, corn, pineapples, cabbage, and sweet peas. The Environmental Working Group is an organization that urges consumers to consider organic versions of what's called the Dirty Dozen. These are the 12 most infected produce. You can find this list on table 9-3 located on page 345 of your textbook. In addition, you will find a list of the Clean 15 on the same table, and this produce is said to be more safe to consume, non-organic. Another way that countries try to achieve sustainability is by implementing government policies. The U.S. government has 3 agricultural policies designed to improve the financial position of farmers. For example, farmers are encouraged to avoid producing crops that are in excess supply. This is done to encourage farmers to leave crops fallow. This will in turn restore nutrients to the soil and help hold the soil in place. A second way is the government pays farmers when certain commodity prices are low. This means the government will set a target price for a commodity and pay farmers the difference between the price they receive in the market and the target price set by the government as a fair level for the commodity. Lastly, the government might buy surplus production and sell or donate to foreign governments. In addition, many low-income Americans receive food stamps in part to stimulate their purchase of additional food. Government policies in developed countries point to a fundamental irony in worldwide agricultural patterns. On one hand, in developed regions like North America and Europe, farmers are encouraged to grow less food. But in developing countries, they struggle to increase food production to match the rate of growth in the population. On a last note, we will recap some of the big ideas and concepts from Key Issue 4. First, agricultural land is being lost to competing uses such as urbanization. Second, the Green Revolution has improved the productivity of farming in some countries. Some agricultural regions face a severe shortage of water. GMO crops are increasingly planted in some countries, especially in the US. And lastly, international trade in food is increasing, but in some places at the expense of producing food for domestic consumption. This is the end of the last lesson for Chapter 9, looking at Key Issue 4, Part 2.